Today's lesson, we're going to talk about ratios. And ratio is something we've been talking about all year, and something that we talked about last year too. But it's one of those things that doesn't go away for us. And this is a little bit of a new concept involving the ratios, because today our ratio problems are going to involve totals. And you'll see what that means in a second. But first I want to review what a ratio problem has been looking like to us, and something we should be able to work with easily. So here's a review of a ratio problem. And it says, the ratio of red cars to blue cars is 8:5. If there are 24 red cars, how many blue cars are there? Alright, this is your basic standard ratio type problem. And what we've been doing is we've been setting up those ratio boxes. We have the ratio and actual, and then we have our whatever we're talking about on the side. So red cars and blue cars, just like that. So we get a ratio box is what they call it. And I like the ratio box because it sets things up very nicely, because now all we have to do is fill things in. So it says the ratio of red cars to blue cars is 8:5. So that's red to blue, which means red to blue. So 8 with the red, 5 with the blue, and that goes under our ratio column because that's the ratio. And we know that there are actually 24 red cars. So across from the red, under the actual, and what are we looking for? We're looking for how many blue cars there are. And at this point we have a lot of different options. We actually have a ratio set up for us, or a proportion. 8/5 equals 24/b. Okay? So that's just taking this information and taking it out on the side there. A lot of you like to do the cross multiply divide method. You would do 5 times 24, get that answer, divide by 8, and that will give us how many blue cars there are. But some of you like to take the shortcut if possible. A lot of you know that 8 times 3 gets us to 24. So if we multiply by 3 here, we could also multiply by 3 here to get us over how many blue cars there are. So 5 times 3 is 15. So should we be looking at, or we should be looking at 15 blue cars for that. Alright, so this is a review of a ratio problem. And now we'll take a look at something or a type of problem where a total is involved. So it says, some ratio problems require that we use the total to solve the problem. So we'll consider this one. The ratio of boys to girls at the assembly was 5:4. If there were 180 students in that assembly, how many girls were there? Alright, so we know the ratio of boys to girls, that is 5:4. But they don't tell us how many girls there are, they don't tell us how many boys there are. They just give us the total of how many boys and girls there are together. That's 180. So we're going to have to, we're still going to use a ratio box, but we're going to change it a little bit so that now it involves a total, and it's going to look something like this. So we're basically adding a third row down at the bottom. We still have our ratio column, we still have our actual column, but now we have this total on the bottom here. So let's see how they get everything filled in here. Ratio 5:4 for boys to girls. That looks good. And the total is 9. So remember, anytime we have a column and we want to get the total of that column, what do? We just add up everything. So this 9 here for the ratio total comes from 5 plus 4, and we get 9. Alright? So that's what we would do to get the total in the ratio box. And we were given also that there were 180 actual boys and girls together. So now we can use our information to figure out how many girls there were. Alright, so since we're interested in how many girls there were, we want to use this row. We also want to use the other row that has two numbers with it. That's got to be this one. Okay, this one isn't going to help us out because we don't know how many boys there are. If we did, this would be a totally different problem, but we don't. So we want to use this row and this row together. So if I take that information out again, I have 4 over 9 equals G over 180. Okay, so we have that proportion set up now. Two ratios that are equal to each other. And we could go ahead, we could do our cross multiply divide if you want. 4 times 180 divided by 9, that'll give us how many girls there are. But we could take a shortcut and notice that 9 times 20 gets us to 180. And I like to use shortcuts when I can. So that means if we multiply this times 20, we should get our answer. So how many girls are there? 4 times 20, that equals 80. And let's just check and see if this works out. We should be able to multiply this by 20. So 5 times 20 is 100. And these two should add together to give us 180. Well, 100 plus 80 gives us 180. Looks like we did it right. So there were 80 girls. So it's no different from the problems that we were doing before, except for now we have that extra total on the bottom. Alright, let's go over one more. Alright. The ratio of football players to soccer players in the room was 5 to 7. If the football and soccer players in the room totaled 48, how many were football players? Alright, so this will be similar to what we just did, except for now we've got football, soccer, and we will need a total at the bottom. That's what they give us as a total. And we also will always have our ratio and actual. Alright. Okay, so let's fill in what we know. Alright, we know that there are, the ratio of football to soccer is 5 to 7. So 5 to 7. And we can figure out that total, remember, by adding 5 plus 7, which gives us 12. Alright, and we know that there are 48 total athletes there. We don't know how many football players there are. We don't know how many, well, let's use X and Y. Alright. So we don't know how many football players there are. We don't know how many soccer players there are. And we want to figure out how many football players there were. Okay. So remember what I said? We want to use the row that has two numbers with it. That's this one. And we want to use the other one that we are looking for. So we're looking for football. So we're going to use this row and this row, and what we have here is 5 over 12 equals x over 48. And if we solve for x, we should be able to see how many actual football players there are. Once again, you could do your cross multiply divide, or I'm noticing that 12 to 48, we just multiply by 4. So times 4, which means we can do that for each row now. Alright, so 5 times 4, that gets us 20. Let's just check and see if this works. 7 times 4 is 28. Okay, this is what we wanted. 20 plus 28 gets us to 48. Looks like we probably did that right. Okay, So, like I said, not much different than the other ratio problems we've done, except we're adding on that row. You figure out which two rows you want to use to help you set up that proportion, and from there you can solve. And remember, you can always check your answer. So, we'll get you the assignment, and we'll talk about that assignment tomorrow if you have questions on it. Thanks.